And INC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula has called on government to lead efforts to reform and regulate the taxi industry. The sector is estimated to transport around 15 million passengers per day. He's called on all parties in the taxi strike to work together to resolve the current impasse.
The National Land Transport Act says something in relation to impounding of vehicles and all of that. But there is this problem we're dealing with in South Africa, that Western Cape is an island, and then it wants to project itself, and these are people who uphold the rule of law. The issue in Cape Town and the strike of the taxi industry, you can never resolve the mobility and public means of transport for the working class and think you can resolve it without the taxi industry. You can't. This fallacy that you can do that without them is incorrect. We know the challenges we face with the taxi industry, and I don't want to talk about them because when I left government, we already started the processes of regulating the industry, and there was consensus through the taxi industry to implement that. We had task teams to implement that, and we are intervening precisely because this economy of the taxi industry is operating in the fringes, you know, and it's not part of the formal economy. And people do as they wish there. They abuse our people, they do all sorts of things, and so on. And but it's an important industry in our country, and that needs to be reformed, and which is what government must actually lead.
Let's now speak to Cape Town Transport MMC, Rob Quintas, joining us. Good to have you, MMC, and thank you very much for your time. I'm sure you are well aware of those issues that are being raised by the Secretary General of the ANC, that for you, the taxi sector is a vital part of the transportation system for the city of Cape Town. And therefore, I would want to believe that you would have made some kind of contribution towards this proposal. What has been your thinking around a proposal to get things back going?
So, very good evening to you, Thabo, and to all of the viewers. So, Thabo, you know, I personally presented and tabled some proposals to the industry, to Santaco, at the Ministry for Mobility Provincial Boardroom on a Friday. I retabled those proposals on Sunday in person with Santaco, and there's also been a lot of to and fro in terms of written communication. Now, you know, the previous speaker, the Secretary General, you know, was once the Minister for Transport, and you know, I fully concur that national government needs to look at an overarching regulatory framework in legislation to bring taxis into some form of transition into businesses. The city's already been largely successful in doing this. Our phase one of the My City, which was instituted in 2009, did bring in various taxi associations to be a part of that as joint ventures with the city and other public transport operators, and has been overwhelmingly successful. We are busy with negotiations already on the phase 2A of the My City, which is the extension into the southeast corridor that would be an additional route, massive route that would be servicing some of the most vulnerable communities in our city, with a hop-on, hop-off, as well as direct trunk between Khayelitsha, Mitchells Plain, Nyanga, Gugulethu, Philippi, Langa, and Bonteheuwel, Heideveld, Hanover Park. It's connecting them to the hub, which we are going to create in Wynberg, then to Claremont, and then to the CBD. So that is a terrific project that we are busy working on. And, you know, that would add more connectivity. And we see the taxi industry as our partners in making that happen.
Yeah.
You know, there's all various taxi operating company models that the city has worked on already, some of them largely successful in pilot phase, which would see taxis potentially operating as feeder services.
Right. But MMC, currently you have been experiencing a full week of no taxi transportation. What do you think needs to happen to unlock that in terms of the proposals that Santaco is considering?
Well, Thabo, it's actually quite simple. Santaco just needs to inform their members that the strike has been lifted. We have been asking them to do so since last week already. Any fears or suspicions that they may have that our tabling of these proposals would now all of a sudden disappear into the ether once taxis resumed were unequivocally put to them in writing that that is not the case. We said these are the proposals. We would like you to get back into the minibus taxi task team engagements that they formally withdrew from about 2 weeks ago. In writing, they withdrew. And we have said to them, it's up to you to get your taxis up and running and get your members back on the road. Let's offer that relief to the people who very often it's no work, no pay. So those people that rely on taxis to get to work that haven't been able to, that affects an entire week. It's already an entire week of wages. Of course, their own drivers. The operators have sufficient funds behind them to maybe withstand a week or so of strike action.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced the driver, the day-to-day, hand-to-mouth driver can afford to be away from work for that long. So they just need to lift the strike and return to the table with us, and let's map out the proposals that were tabled on Friday and on Sunday, and then again largely today. We're opening that hand of friendship to return to the table and make this work.
So, from what we heard from them last night, they're saying the one thing that they're definitely certain on is that they seek that moratorium on impoundments because of the messaging that has been coming from the city, 25 taxis for every truck and every bus that is torched. So they're saying already that creates an environment where there is a trust deficit. So we need that kind of assurance from the city. Do you think coming out of the deliberations earlier on, those are areas where the city is willing to relax on?
Well, certainly, I mentioned it repeatedly to the industry. Those minibus taxis that are operating with a driver who has a driver's license, who has a public driver's permit, and who's driving a vehicle that has an operating license and is driving a vehicle that is roadworthy, has absolutely nothing to fear in terms of impoundment. Yeah. It is those drivers who are climbing into an operator's vehicle, because very often the driver is not the operator. The operator is largely the vehicle owner. That is very prescribed in law. So former Minister Mbalula, the Secretary General of the ANC, spoke about what can and can't be done in terms of the NLTA and the National Land Transport Act and the National Road Transport Act. It says very clearly that if you don't have the necessary licensing and operating license, driver's permits, etc., for driving public members of the public, that is impoundable.
Yeah.
But what he also doesn't mention when he refers to Cape Town or the Western Cape as an island is that something else in that regulation speaks to very clearly and the conditions of the operating license.
Yes.
Now, every province has the prerogative to set their own conditions for operating licenses that is set by the provincial authority, the regulatory entity, as well as the provincial government, and the city enforces according to those operating license conditions.
That's precisely what I want to talk about. Is the city willing to talk to those? Because, yes, we know the three, right? Operating license, PDP, driver's license, and roadworthy. Those are well articulated in Section 87 as impoundable offenses. Now, what is happening is that most of the fines, the Santaco says, are written, as you say, in contravention of operating license. And it doesn't articulate what the fine could be. So if the city deems driving without your seatbelt is in contravention of operating license, they can then impound based on that. And that's where the murky waters begin to creep in.
I think it's a bit disingenuous for Santaco to say that it just says operating conditions of the operating license have not been met or whatever it might be the case. That would be the pound. That's how vehicle would go to the pound. But the actual traffic fine that is applied to the infringement that has occurred, causing this whole process, that is very clearly articulated. So in other words, if it is, as you say, a seatbelt, it will say driver not wearing seatbelt, or driver or a firearm being in the vehicle, or whatever the various contraventions might be. That is very articulated electronically by the officers who are administering that. So that is where we've repeatedly said to Santaco, let us sit down, let us look at the 46 conditions that exist within the operating license plan for the Western Cape, and let us sit with the province, yourselves, and let's really go with a fine-tooth comb through it and look at what we can consider to be a serious offence, where the maximum sort of penalty, in this case impoundments, should apply, and the ones that are not that serious, which we could maybe refer to as minor infringements, in which case would only be eligible for a fine. We have said that we are willing to go through that with them, and then provide a standard operating procedure or protocol for all of our law enforcement, Metro Police, Traffic Police, that they will follow, so that we remove the ability of the officer on the ground to use their discretionary method to decide whether it requires impoundment or not, and that we actually speak to the future saying, you know, officer, this is the standard operating procedure. These offences going forward would be a fine only, and these serious ones would then result in impoundment. So we're looking at taking that discretionary, because it is discretionary. The peace officer has the ability to decide. And we're going to make it something more formalized and in consultation with the industry, where we look at something that is a standard operating guideline for those peace officers when pulling over a taxi for whatever the offence might be.
So do you think that MMC, it would probably clear this debate? For example, if you're saying that between June and August, the 6,000 or so vehicles, as the JP Smith, the MMC, has been saying, they've been impounding on a monthly basis. Those can be clearly articulated what the offence was. It's not a blanket in contravention of the operating license. Do you think if that data could certainly be made available, it could clear this misconception, as you put it?
Absolutely. And once again, you know, the offer was made on Friday already and reiterated on Sunday, and then also in other negotiations that have happened in writing and confirmations of proposals in written correspondence. We have articulated that we would, as a local government, be very willing to go through all of those impoundments that are there. And once we have, with the industry, through that engagement process over a period of a week or two, decided and agreed on minor versus major, we'd be willing then on all those minor ones to make representation to the traffic courts, which largely falls under the jurisdiction of the National Prosecuting Authority, and say, we as the City of Cape Town would like to make representation that X, Y, and Z, that these vehicles with their various, whatever, be considered for release without fee, and then, of course, those that, with consultation with the industry, we agree on are, you know, serious offences. Then the entire legal process around that serious offence needs to go through the court system. The city doesn't have the powers to release a vehicle. However, we certainly can provide a representation to the National Prosecuting Authority via the traffic court to release vehicles based on the discussions which have identified minor versus major infringements. And
then would you say more or less that is what Santaco would need to be considering with its members tonight as they're deliberating?
Well, there's some other items on the table. I don't want to go, I mean, I'm only reiterating the things that have been discussed on Friday and on Sunday and reiterated in the media throughout the week. You know, there are mechanisms to those proposals that have been put on the table. There's some additional items that we put on the table. And we, as the Mayor said, it is a very fair and reasonable offer that still works towards ensuring the safety of their passengers, the people that climb into a taxi to get home to their families. We want to keep those people safe. And we are finding the proposals that we've tabled again today certainly should be considered as favorable to the industry. They certainly were willing to go and take those proposals back to their structures and discuss them with them. And hope springs eternal. I remain hopeful that we may see a written statement tonight or tomorrow morning,
yes,
where the industry confirms that that the strike is over and they're going to resume their operations, because that really is what is desperately needed in the city of Cape Town. Too many people are not being able to access vital opportunities because of the ongoing taxi strike, which Santaco could lift at any moment.
MMC for Urban Mobility, that is Rob Quintas there. Appreciate your time. Thanks.